to start actually with a really simple question, which we got today, which is regarding fermented foods. For people who have oxalate issues, fermented foods may be one of those things that they get referred to because of gut support and ideas like that. The challenge would be if you, at the same time as having your oxalate issue, also have a histamine issue, which is extraordinarily common. I was mentioning just before I turned on the record for our session here that 18 years ago when I started this, I did not realize I had histamine issues that were going on at the same time as oxalate issues. I just kind of assumed everything was related to oxalate because I could see the clear relationship between lowering oxalate in my diet and symptoms getting more intense. But in fact, oxalate can act as a bit of a irritant to the immune system, which we'll talk about a bit more when I talk about how MCAS and histamine are related to oxalate. But in short, oxalate irritates the immune system and it's more likely to react. And one of the things that the immune system uses is histamine. So fermented foods may allow you to get more probiotics, but you kind of have to think about probiotics with a little more nuance if your gut is also being affected by histamine or if other systems in your body are being affected by histamine. And the reason for that is that some probiotic species, so some of the actual bacteria that we're trying to consume, may actually produce histamine. So that's not in our favor. And many fermented foods, because of the fermentation process, have been exposed to air. They have aged, and aging is clearly linked to histamine as well. So that combination of things can be a real problem. And so like my obvious question would be then, can I get around that? And you can in some cases, if you can find a probiotic, which you can use to ferment things, which doesn't have histamine producing strains in it, that may be helpful. But the thing to consider is, does the fermentation process leave the food exposed to air, which does seem to help to drive histamine production, and how old is the food? So if you have something which ferments very quickly, you might be able to tolerate it, especially if you have low histamine bacteria that handling that fermentation process. But for things that take a long time to ferment, sauerkraut would be a great example. I would not touch sauerkraut with a 10-foot pole if you have histamine issues. And there are certain approaches to gut health which really focus on probiotics. And honestly, I've done most of my gut healing without focusing a lot on probiotics. So I think it's worthwhile to consider that oxalate itself is a gut irritant. And if you get that gut irritant out of the way, then the gut starts to repair itself. I've learned a lot more respect for the human body than perhaps that I used to have, where I thought I had to hack it. And in fact, if you still have an appendix, then you are likely still able to colonize your own gut even after things like antibiotics, which are so detrimental to the gut. So there's that, which we often don't think about. And I have also seen research where it looks like some of a gut bacteria will actually move into the mucosal lining of the gut and kind of protect themselves when antibiotics are present. So our guts are a lot more resilient than we think, and they are a lot less sterile than we think. So probiotics don't necessarily kill everything. And it's not that you can never take probiotics, but I would handle them with care. Just today, I was talking with Allie about supplements and how we've all had the experience of a supplement that kicked our butts. And in my case, it was not a vitamin, it was not a mineral, it was not a therapeutic nutrient. A probiotic kicked my butt. I was so sick, I did not know which end was up. And it was actually a therapeutic probiotic, which now goes by the name of Visbiome in the USA, Bisbiome. It is a therapeutic probiotic. It's known to have research which shows that the species there degrade oxalate. So that's a great benefit, right? And in fact, I think I do know some people who have experienced Fermented was using it to produce yogurt. So it's an interesting mix of species. But it was so powerful. It swung my gut microbiome so hard, so fast. I couldn't tolerate it. So when it comes to our microbiome, I think we need to treat it with a little bit of respect. It's adjusted itself to where it is at the moment, which might look bad to us as well. But it's adjusted itself based on the kind of food sources it's had available. If one of the big food sources it's had available has been oxalate, it may actually be adapted to that. And so you may have a gut microbiome where the species don't lay out the way you might like, but it may be that you need to not swing that too hard or too fast until you actually have an opportunity to see whether or not your body's ready for that. At the time when I tried what used to be called VSL3, I think I was still too early in the dumping process, and oh boy, my system just did not know what to do with itself. So when in doubt, start small, which is something I think I say all the time. And I think we need to give our bodies some time to adapt to the new fuel ratio. So the food coming in is going to have less and less oxalate in it over time because that's what we're doing with our diet. And we just need to allow that gut to adapt to that. So fermented foods are not a clear no, but they're not also a clear yes. We need to kind of have a little nuance, look at where we are in the process, and then essentially decide what kind of bacteria we want to create that ferment and whether or not we can tolerate the kind of aging process that the food's going through. So there may be a lot of questions that you have to ask before you dive down the rabbit hole of fermented foods.